our weekly conversation with Keith Smith, NBA writer, Yahoo Sports, Pro Basketball Talk, NBC Sports. He does it all, man.
He's the man.
He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we do each and every week at this time. We talk NBA second half of the season. We got a lot to dive into here. So welcome back, Keith, in the All-Star break in the books, and congratulations to you. What's happening?
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Really excited for new opportunities coming my way, and excited. We got a great season going on, so it's a good time to get in.
Yeah, we were just mentioning Keith will now be covering the NBA with NBC, Yahoo Sports, Real GM, so you can read him across multiple platforms. He just added NBC's Pro Basketball Talk to the Ledger as we get ready for the second half of the season. So hat tip to you and them for picking you up, man. And all right, well, today Al Horford has come out and said that he has acknowledged that he is going to come off the bench for the second half of the season, at least to start the season. Number one, are you surprised that the Sixers, they did it before the break and it worked, but they kind of insinuated that it was matchup based because the Clippers were small. But are you surprised that Brett Brown and the Sixers are sticking with it to open up the second half?
No, I'm not surprised. I think this is kind of the logical evolution to where things were going. It was the offense was just not functioning the way they wanted it to. They know they can more than get by defensively by moving Horford to the bench. I think another part of this that's going a little overlooked because we're all focused on the starting five pieces, they have not really had a good quality backup big man all year. Mike Scott has struggled. They're not getting anything out of Kyle O'Quinn. The best backup big man has been Norval Pell, who's coming off the two-way deal. So I think by having Horford there, you really stabilize both units. It will really allow them to keep him and Joel Embiid's minutes split as much as possible, which also has the added benefit of controlling Embiid's usage the rest of the way without having to openly just sit him out on nights. And I think that's going to be really important as we head down the stretch here.
Yeah, so I guess the next question would be, if Horford's going to the bench, which of the guys they have now make the most sense to replace him? You got Korkmaz, you've got Thibault, you've got Glenn Robinson III, you've got Alec Burks. Any of those names feel like the right fit to jump in there?
I think it's probably Korkmaz because he gives you that shooting and spacing on that first unit. I think that's really what you're looking for to get there. I think that allows you to keep Alec Burks coming off the second unit, where I think as we get into the second half and he's now got practices and time under his belt, you'll see him become much more of the primary playmaker on that second unit. And then maybe they'll go to Robinson on those nights where you need someone who's a little bit more of a defensive presence in the opening lineup. But I think it'll probably be Korkmaz who gets the initial shot. And I think that's the one that makes the most sense going forward.
What about the minutes now and how Brett Brown tries to figure his way through this? Because Horford's moved to the bench, but we saw in the Clippers game, that's the only sample we have to go off of, where Horford and Embiid, they played together, but only for maybe 2 to 4 minutes in the fourth quarter where they overlapped. How do you expect that to be moving forward and how that will possibly impact the bench and the rotation?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see them much together at all. Maybe if you're going against another team that plays two bigs, you see Horford in there with Embiid at the end of the half and at the end of games. But considering how many teams go small, I think you're going to see Embiid out there. You might see maybe Horford if you need a little bit more offense as far as a stretch element on the floor. Not that Embiid doesn't give you great offense, but if you're really looking to go a little faster and come back, maybe Horford gets those minutes instead of Embiid. But I don't think you're going to see those two play much together at all anymore.
How much of the pressure does this move of Horford going to the bench relieve out of the valve, right? Because the sky was falling here in Philadelphia going into that Clippers game, and they look great. And now it's been 9 days since they last played, and everyone's finally calm for him. Now they're back in action tomorrow. So how much does this move alone help things in your mind?
I think it's going to help because I think it's going to bring a lot of balance to both that starting five and then that second five. I think what's important, though, is if they win, it helped a lot, and it's great. If they don't win, then now what do you turn to? Because you're kind of out of ideas. You can't then throw Horford back in there and put Embiid coming off the bench. You're not going to move Simmons and Embiid. So I think this is almost, sounds weird to say it with, 2 months left in the regular season, but it sounds like it's almost a last gasp attempt of, all right, how do we figure out what to do with this roster as constructed, because it wasn't working before, but this is what we can try. If this one doesn't work, then you're just probably going to have to ride it out into the offseason and look for the changes then.
What's this team's identity moving forward? Because, okay, you have this spacing that everyone's been talking about all season long. You think you have it at least now with this move. So what's their identity? We were, sold bully ball at the beginning of the year and defense, and now it seems like, well, maybe not so much. What does Embiid have to do differently, or Simmons, or what does the offense look like?
Yeah, I think the identity is still the defense. That's going to be their calling card. That's going to be what they're going to lean on most. They continue to, even with these moves, everything you continue to hear is we believe when the playoffs roll around, we'll be fine. And we'll see, that remains to be seen, obviously. But hey, it's going to be defense. They're going to have to build around. We're going to go out there and in an era where teams are winning a lot more games, 110 to 105, we're going to be the team that wins 98 to 95. That's going to be the way we're going to play basketball. And if you can slow the game down some, really lean on your defense, it allows efficiencies. But that's going to have to be what it is, because they didn't do enough to change to become a completely different team, and this lineup change isn't going to change that in and of itself either.
I'm talking with Keith Smith here, of course, NBA, NBC Sports, Yahoo, Real GM on the Sports Bash on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. The NBA second half of the season opens tomorrow night. It's Sixers and the Nets. Al Horford is going to start on the bench. Sixers in fifth, 34-21. They're a game and a half behind fourth place Miami. They are 3.5 games behind Boston for the third spot, and they are about 6 games behind Toronto for the second spot. Realistically, how far up that ledger can they get?
They could definitely catch Boston. 6 games just with only 23, 24 games left or so. That's just too much. You're not going to make that up with that few games left. It's just too hard. But Boston, 3.5. Celtics have had their own injury issues. They've had some problems on occasion. They've got a very tough closing schedule, so you could catch Boston. Obviously, Miami's within range. I think that's the goal, is to try to get to 3 or 4, because they've had so many problems away from home that home court advantage is going to mean a lot to them. Unfortunately, it means a lot to Miami, too, who's a very similar makeup when you look at the home-road split. So I think those two teams are really going to be battling it out for 4 or 5. And ideally, both of them would love to get up to 3, because that keeps you away from the Bucks all the way until the conference finals.
Right now, Philly, Miami, who would win that series? Is it as simple as who has home court?
That's what I was going to do. I was going to cop out and say, hey, give me who's at home, because I think that's what really comes down to for both those teams. The Heat rely so heavily on role players around Jimmy Butler, and role players always play better at home than they do on the road, and that's really important. Now, if Miami can get Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder up to speed, they're legitimately 10 to 11 deep, and they're going to be able to overcome just about anything. And those guys are super versatile. They can match up any way you want to go, and I think that would give them a slight edge over Philadelphia. But if Philly's at home, I'm going to take the Sixers.
Okay, Philly and Boston have played 4 times. Philly's won 3, but Boston won the last one, which made people say, uh-oh. So if Philly and Boston play right now, 7-game series, who do you like?
I'm going to lean towards the Celtics. I think they were in those games more where they lost, and they really figured out a lot of stuff that they can do that can really get them to create offense. Now, if Philly sticks with the smaller groups, that makes it a little bit easier on them. And then Boston has no reprieve when Joel Embiid goes out of the game because they're going to struggle to defend Al Horford too. But I tend to lean, I think Philadelphia is going to have to go back to Horford in the starting five because I don't think it's going to fix all their ills. And when they do that, they just struggle to defend the Celtics in that perimeter-based group because Boston doesn't really care that you have this great rim protection in and around the paint because that's not where they live. They're going to live out around the arc and focus on breaking guys down off the bounce.
That's an interesting point. Now, are you suggesting that they would use Horford in the starting lineup in a series against Boston in general, or at some point in general they would have to bring him back?
In general, I think they're going to go back to it because I think this is going to work for a little while, but I think it's going to be, maybe you come out and you look pretty good for, a couple weeks, and then it goes right back to where it is. Because I just think the bigger problems, it's not to denigrate Furkan Korkmaz, but I don't think he's making that huge of a difference as far as, what he is in that starting five. He's not J.J. Redick. No defense is bending towards him. And I think the challenge is now what you went from was no real place to attack them for an offensive team. And now teams are going to do what they can to get Korkmaz isolated and go at him over and over again. We saw Boston do that a few years ago in the playoffs against Marco Bellinelli, Ersan Ilyasova. They did it. They've done it some against Korkmaz at other times. That's what you'll see the Celtics do in any of the other good teams. And that's a challenge. And I think eventually Philadelphia will say, all right, this isn't working any better. Let's go back to the way we were originally built, try to get that working and go into the playoffs with what we believed we could be all along.
We were talking about, obviously, this move of Horford remaining on the bench, at least for now, Keith, right before you came on. And Mike brought up a good point regarding Burks and Robinson and the acquisition of those two players playing a part in Brett Brown allowing Al to stay on the bench. And, when you bring up those other points, I don't disagree with you. They're all very valid, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But don't you think that Burks and Robinson help, ease a lot of that tension and a lot of those issues that you bring up?
No, it definitely does. They're much better options than what they had in Trey Burke and James Ennis. That's really the two guys who they replaced. And in James Ennis, he just never quite fit there, never really became, I think, what they hoped he would be for them. And now the other thing I will say with Burks and Robinson is, let's not forget, they were on minimum contracts this year for a reason. They were free for anybody to sign, basically. And then the other thing is, they only had to trade away some second-round picks to get them. Anybody could have went and gotten either one of those players at the trade deadline. So that kind of gives you a sense of teams they're okay players. They're better than what they had. Maybe now they're 9 deep instead of being 7 deep. But I just don't see that they're going to be these massive upgrades that are going to change the trajectory of the season.
So besides all of the points and the issues and the question marks surrounding the team that we've already discussed, Keith, what's the biggest storyline or wild card in your mind? Because it goes back and forth here. Ben Simmons in the half court and Embiid, and is he able to carry a team through multiple playoff series? I think it will always fall on Embiid, but I also think Ben can be able to win this team a series or two as well himself. So how do you look at it?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do style of play-wise now with the new group, because I think they're built with this new starting group to play a little bit faster, which I think really plays into Ben Simmons' hands. And I think that's the guy who really makes them go. You know what you're going to get out of Joel Embiid night to night. As long as he's in there, he's giving you 20 and 10 in really good defense. You don't have to worry about that. It's Simmons who waxes and wanes. If you can get him going, and I think the way to do that is play a little faster. Use him as a guy who you use as a screener off the ball a little bit more, which you can do with Josh Richardson being your ball handler. You can do that with Burks being a part of things. We saw how great he was in the All-Star game as a role man. I realize it's an exhibition and defenses aren't what they are. But
not Sunday.
No, yeah, they played a lot harder, and
Yeah.
you see that, right? You see what he can be as a roll option, because then he can almost catch and go to the basket himself, or he can catch and find that shooter, which a lot of roll guys don't have that passing ability. So I think you got to really bend the offense a little more towards fitting in his skills with this new grouping, because you're certainly built to play a lot faster. And Embiid as a trail man, either trail man, shooting jump shots on the break, or being the guy who's kind of rumbling down the lane as that secondary transition guy, that's huge. You just couldn't play that fast with Embiid and Horford on the floor, because it wasn't going to work when you have two guys who really have to play a little bit at a slower pace.
All right, second half, a lot to get into on the west side as well. The Lakers are the top seed, Denver 2, Clippers 3, Utah 4. That's your top 4 on the west side right now. How much change do you anticipate at the top of the West?
I think the Lakers are still going to finish first. That 4-game cushion, again, that's a lot, and they're still pretty good. I think it also allows them to spot LeBron James and Anthony Davis the occasional rest day the rest of the year. If they were only up a game or two, they'd have to continue to push all the way through. After that, though, the next 5 teams, because I'll include the Rockets all the way down there at 5, they can really mix it up, and we could see that turn any number of ways there, because you can envision any one of those teams very easily going on an 8, 9, 10-game win streak down the stretch here. And what's different about the West this year is after you get past the top 8, the rest of the teams in the West, they look a lot more like Eastern Conference teams. They're just not very good. And those teams are going to be able to bank some wins, where in past years the West has gone 10 or 11 deep, and you're struggling. It's a bloodbath just to get into the playoffs, where right now it's kind of looking like we might have our playoff field set on both sides, and now it's just about positioning, which allows teams to play it a lot different. And just like in the East, I don't know that teams really want to get into series with the Lakers or Clippers, so we might see some of that funny business down the end of the season where they're jockeying to avoid one of those two teams.
Interesting. Clippers, a lot of people, waiting to see when they're going to get that next gear. Do they have that other gear? Is that gear there, or is what you're seeing what you're getting?
Yeah, they better hope it's there, because right now you're already starting to see that's a lot of guys, and they're going to add Reggie Jackson to that mix too. And I don't know that those are all the guys to say, you know what, I'll sacrifice. I'll be the guy who, sits tonight and is, not because I'm any kind of load management, but I'm going to sit because we can't play 12 guys. And this is easily Doc Rivers' biggest challenge right now, is when you look at it, it's awesome to have depth until guys start saying, hey, I want to play. Like, where am I at? Why am I not playing at all? Or I'm playing 5 minutes in the first half, and that's all I'm getting. And that's going to be a challenge. Now, it's great because on nights when Kawhi sits or Paul George sits or Patrick Beverly sits, you're not downgrading massively in talent. But it's going to be a challenge for Doc to figure that out. And you're starting to hear a little bit of rumbles of, hey, we got to get this thing together. These guys need to start playing, because we need to know who we are going into the playoffs, rather than we hit that, second week of April and it's a playoff game and we're like, well, we still don't exactly know how our rotations work, because we sit guys out from game to game.
All right, so Denver is interesting. They were right in this spot last year, and I feel like people are feeling the same way about them again. Fair or unfair?
No, it's definitely fair. I think people are looking at it and, all right, you're cute, you're a fun regular season team, but if you can't do it in the playoffs, I don't really care. And I think for, even though the Clippers haven't been there, done that, their guys have been there, done that. I think people still look at the Rockets a little bit and say, all right, we know Harden and Westbrook are going to bring it in the postseason. We feel pretty good about them, where the Nuggets, you just kind of feel a little like, I don't know, you're good, but I just don't know if I can trust you when the lights shine the brightest.
It seems like Milwaukee's the same thing in the East.
100%. Milwaukee's absolutely that way. That's part of that's Mike Budenholzer. He had some really good Atlanta Hawks teams that the reality is good regular seasons don't buy you a whole heck of a lot, especially when it's the second and third time around that we're telling that story, because the playoffs, it's all about adjustments and then making adjustments to those. And if the Bucks do what they did last year, which is this is who we are, this is the way we play, and we're not going to change it, well, that can get you beat in the playoffs. And that's what happened to Budenholzer last year. That's what happened to some of his Hawks teams in previous years. You got to be able to make that switch. Now, they're a different team than they are from last year. They're a lot more versatile, so I think that could change things some. But there's very much a prove it to me when it matters approach with the Bucks, which is a little sad because they're on pace for an absolutely historic season.
So, are we suggesting that we're not buying the Bucks?
I'm not going to go that far. I buy them. I think that they're a very, very good team. I just don't think they're not the Warriors where you felt like with them, all right, they're great in the regular season, and how the heck are you going to beat this team in a playoff series? And I know it happened a couple of times, but it was always in the finals that it happened, and the Rockets pushed them. But because of the way the Bucks went out last year against the Raptors, and the Raptors found stuff that works, and their handful of regular season losses this year have been against teams that they're very likely to see again in the postseason. I think there's just a little bit of skepticism there. I don't want to go as far, like you said, to say I don't buy it, but I think you got to look at it somewhat and say, yeah, I buy you. I think you're very good, but I don't know that I'm buying all the way in until I see it happen in postseason.
Keith Smith, we're jumping around with you a little bit, but I want to go back to the Rockets. You brought them up a couple minutes ago, and listen, you got to give them credit because they're not afraid to change things and turn things upside down. And they're playing small ball. They have PJ Tucker here at the 5 spot, and that could be a challenge for teams out west in the postseason. Do you think that with that lineup, they can cause some serious damage?
Yeah, they can. My worry for the Rockets is that when we get into the postseason is having enough left. They're adding Damari Carroll and Jeff Green, but other than Tyson Chandler and Isaiah Hartenstein, so an older guy and a guy who's very unproven, they've got nothing as far as real centers go. And my worry is that's all well and good, but you're now asking 2 more months of the regular season where you're pushing for playoff seeding, and then, a playoff grind to ask PJ Tucker to be that guy up front, that's a challenge. And then on top of that, beyond just playing small, they're only playing about 8 guys a night. And that's tough too. That's always been the one question, even going back to the Phoenix Suns days for Mike D'Antoni, is he plays such a short rotation. Can you live with that? Are you going to have enough left when you get in the postseason? We've seen James Harden. He looks exhausted a lot by the time we get in that second round of the playoffs. So that's going to be the challenge for the Rockets is just having enough left for when it really matters, because it's going to be such a grind and push for them the rest of the way.
All right, NBA season kicks off, I should say, tomorrow night, and the sprint to the end. Here they come. Any other buyout candidates that you see that could impact this race?
The one everybody's keeping an eye on is Tristan Thompson in Cleveland. He's gone to the bench as they're committed to playing Andre Drummond and Kevin Love up front. So he's kind of the last guy that people have an eye on as being maybe an impact guy. And he still seems like someone, a lot of times these buyout guys don't amount to a whole heck of a lot. But Thompson, if he lands in the right place, seems like a guy teams feel, and a lot of executives and other players around the league are, yeah, he can make a big difference because he's a defender, he's a rebounder, and he knows his game on offense. He doesn't try to do anything he can't do. So that's somebody that there's a lot of teams hoping he gets set free. Challenge is no clutch client. So Rich Paul, LeBron James, the Clutch Group, has ever given back money in a buyout. And the Cavs have no reason to let him go because he's a free agent at the end of the year anyway. So there's no reason for them to let him go unless it's strictly goodwill, unless he gives some money back.
Real quick, John Beilein officially gone in Cleveland. I mean, is this surprising, shocking? I mean, he had a 5-year deal that he walked away from, but this was an odd fit to begin with.
Yeah, it's surprising from the standpoint of he walked away from so much money. What's not surprising is it didn't work. This guy's he's the same age as my dad. And, and he's been a lifetime college guy. Asking him to come in and coach NBA players, that was a stretch to begin with. That's why we don't see a lot of these guys with no prior NBA experience go. Billy Donovan had some NBA experience. He was a player. He stayed connected to NBA players through USA Basketball. Brad Stevens was very young, so he came in basically and said, look, I'm adaptable. I'm too young to be stuck in my ways. I think the end of the big-time college coach who's been a lifer, that's probably over for a while for making the jump to the NBA because it never, ever seems to work out.
He's Keith Smith, And you can let me real quick before you roll. Keith now with NBC Sports Pro Basketball Talk, also Yahoo NBA, also Real GM. So he's got all of the outlets that you can still find him, and at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter, and of course the Wednesdays right here on the Sports Bash. All right, second half of the season ramps up tomorrow night. Thanks, Keith.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Keith Smith, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.